All right, what's up, people? I think we're live now. I'm just getting the chat up, getting set up. Kate Justice in the house. What's up? New person about to be converted to Catholicism. That's funny. All right, so let me just make sure all is well with the stream. See, I don't have some fancy, cool personal assistant at my side who kind of does all the computer stuff. I have to manage all this stuff while I'm trying to think and talk. It's not that bad, but it takes a little bit of a minute to make sure all systems are go. How's everyone doing tonight? All right. So got a lot of things to talk about. Some interesting developments recently. And we're going to be joined in about a half hour by an interesting guy named Ben Sixsmith. It's kind of hard to say. Ben Sixsmith. We're going to talk about a bunch of things. We were kind of planning our discussion today in Twitter DMs. But I think what I want to do is start with a little bit of housekeeping, because as I've gotten into doing these streams, I've actually been quite pleasantly surprised by how much interest there's been and engagement. My view counts aren't through the roof or anything, but for the people that are watching, people type a lot in the chats and I get a lot of messages and people seem, quite into it. So that's been quite an interesting thing to observe. So it's inspired me to kind of think a little bit more about how I might, turn this into something that's like even more fun and interesting for people to be a part of and for me to do. So I've done a lot of thinking about that, and I've made certain decisions or commitments on how to do that. So I wanted to share some news with you on that front. Then whatever time is left between that and having Ben on, I have some possible rants prepared. So everyone, I want you to just relax and get settled in. And, if you're cooking or cleaning or whatever, do your thing. I'm just going to be massaging your ears in the background. This is easygoing stuff. I'm not going to be inundating you with really fast-paced, Adderall-fueled theory generation. No. I'll just be dosing you with a moderately above average intelligence level and half-baked ideas. And if I'm lucky, maybe I'll accidentally say a few things that are funny. So the first thing I want to talk about is that I'm going to commit to doing these live streams on a schedule. All right. So I'll just experiment with this for a few weeks. I've kind of looked at the times that work for me, and I'm going to do a live stream. What exactly I'm going to live stream, I'll leave to be determined on the day of, and that'll probably be always different. But what I'm going to do is at this time, this is a good time for me. So 8 p.m. in the UK on Tuesdays, or that's 3 p.m. Eastern time for those of you in New York or the East Coast or whatever. But that's 5 a.m. in Australia, and I know some of you are in Australia. So the second time of the week that I'm going to commit to doing this, I want to make it available to different parts of people in different parts of the world, I guess. Not like my audience is like some massive global phenomenon. I'm not trying to make it sound like that. But I know that there's a few of you in different parts. So I'm trying to make this, so different people can participate at different times. So the second time I'm going to commit to doing a live stream every week is on, let's see, I wrote it down, on Saturdays at 9 a.m. New York time. And that is 2 p.m. in UK time where I am. And that, I admit, is also late for people in Australia, but it's at least doable. And since it's a Saturday, a lot of people stay up late on Saturday night. So what better way to spend it than hanging out with me? So that's 11 p.m. in Australia, I believe, if all my calculations are correct. Okay, so I'm going to write this down somewhere, of course, and share it for your reference. But for now, this, you've heard it here first. I'll do this for at least like 3 weeks, I think. I think I can commit to that. And if it's fun and people like it and it feels worth doing, then I'll continue doing it. And if not, then I'll just discontinue it and go on to the next thing. Jim asks if I'm watching the International Soccer Sports Cup semifinal. No, I'm afraid I'm not. I'm not hating on it, but just not for me. I haven't watched any of it whatsoever. One additional idea Kevin suggests. Oh, good point. Yeah, to turn notifications on for streaming channels that you're interested in. Wait, I'm not sure I know exactly what that means. Maybe you can clarify what you mean by that. But cool. All right, so that's one bit of housekeeping. I'm going to do this regularly on a schedule so you can tune in and expect me. You can rely on me. The other thing is I'm also going to do some that are kind of off the schedule because, there's thousands of super interesting people out there who want to talk, and they have different schedules. So I have to work around them too. This isn't fucking Joe Rogan. I can't expect people to fly to Southampton or something, let alone adjust their schedule to talk on my little live stream show. Oh, right. Kevin, thank you. That's what he means. So yeah, you can turn on notifications to know whenever I'm streaming, if you want to be notified of that. Thank you for reminding people of that. So I'm also going to do like a bunch of one-off streams at different times. I'll try to share information about them ahead of time. But one, for instance, I want to alert you to is tomorrow night I'm going to be doing a stream with Nick's Land. I think that's how they pronounce it. Nick's Land is a fairly well-known and I guess rather notorious personality in the kind of accelerationist Twitter sphere, or the cave Twitter circles. And I've been in communication with Nick's Land for a fair while now, so I think we know each other fairly well. But it's impossible to keep up really and understand deeply like what all these different people really think. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know what Nick's thinks a little bit more. One of their big ideas is this notion of lesbian neo-reaction, which just sounds hilarious to me and super fascinating. So I think I have a sense of where they're going with that, but I can't wait to pick their brain about it a little bit more. Also, I should mention Nick's has been a fairly requested guest. I've got a few messages asking me to do some sort of conversation with Nick's. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll be tomorrow at about this time, but an hour later. So that's 9 p.m. in the UK, and I guess that should be 4 p.m. in New York time. So check that out. That should be really interesting. Nick's is a fascinating person with some really strange ideas. Oh, by the way, that Nick's basically was the impetus behind that whole necrophilia dust up that happened a few weeks ago. So maybe we can ask them about that if we want to. All right. So what else? Oh yeah, I've been reflecting on the fact that I'm aware that my room here is kind of like it's not a very appealing environment for these live streams. This room is kind of like barf colored, and I don't really do too much. It's just kind of like how I live. There's like stuff strewn about. I'm not the most organized or artful of people when it comes to home decoration. But if I'm going to do this more, I was thinking I could spruce this room up a little bit, make the visuals in this stream a little bit cooler or more interesting. But then it was funny because I actually downstairs in the house, I'm upstairs in my house right now. Downstairs, we actually have a fair amount of art. We have, like a lot of art on the walls downstairs. Just for some reason, we haven't put any in up here so much. So I was thinking about moving up some of the art from downstairs up here, but then it's kind of funny. Like I actually can't do that because with public intellectual culture today, like everyone is so sensitive to all kinds of signaling that the selection of a more or less totally innocent piece of artwork might be interpreted as like me trying to signal some sort of political affiliation or make some kind of like stance like that. So it's actually kind of funny. I couldn't bring up any artworks to kind of put on these walls to make this stream a little bit more interesting visually. Like for instance, we have a large painting of the painting Olympia by Edward Manet, and we both really like the painting. It's just a beautiful painting that for some reason we both have talked about liking earlier in our relationship together, my wife and I, that is. But for those of you who know it, it's like a naked woman who's a white woman, and then there's like a black woman who's like a servant woman, kind of like setting up flowers near her. And it's like very large. It's like it would take up most of that wall. So I was like, oh, this is a beautiful painting. Maybe I'll bring this one up as a nice background for the streams. But then I'm like, no, this is going to look weird. Like everyone is so like race sensitive nowadays that people are going to be like, is this like some sort of like racist dog whistle because there's a white woman and there's a black servant? Like, is he trying to say something? People think like that nowadays. So I'm like, okay, I won't bring that one up because, and admittedly, like, you know, I understand these things can look strange. Even though, you know, there's plenty of like anti-racist readings of that painting. We can have that discussion or whatever. But that, I mean, on the other hand, what's funny is I've always been a big fan of the Black Panthers, and I actually have a few pieces of art that are Black Panther related. And I don't want to feature those because then it looks like I'm virtue signaling, like I'm trying to show off my like anti-racist credentials or something like that. So it's like, yeah, everyone is so signal sensitive that it's, you know, if you want to do a sort of public intellectual video type of setup, it's surprisingly hard actually to come up with visual arrangements that are interesting and cool and fun to look at and nice to look at, and that, you know, represent what you want to represent without like, you know, upsetting someone. It's very interesting. So anyway, the point of that was a bit of an aside, but the point of this is to say I'm going to do something to kind of spruce up this room a little bit if I'm going to do streams for at least a few weeks. So I got to find some like I need to like find some works of art or images that together paint a kind of interesting but like not politically well, there's nothing wrong with being politically divisive, or, you know, I want to just basically send the signal that I want to send and not, you know, have all these like erroneous interpretations flying around or people thinking that I'm dog whistling. But I'm going to work on that. If you have any suggestions, let me know. If you have an interior decorator that you want to recommend, let me know, who's willing to work as an unpaid intern. Right. So final bit of housekeeping. I know this is a lot, but I've been thinking about this stuff a lot. So yeah, I'm just sharing it with you. I am slowly and currently building up a little private community of sorts. And I won't tell you too much about it right now. It's currently underway, and the people that I have kind of the closest relationships with through this stream and through the YouTube and through my Twitter and podcast and all of that, like people that I've actually been in touch with over the past year or two as I've kind of done my internet stuff like more seriously. They're kind of, I'm slowly kind of bringing people into this little community, but it's specifically going to be organized around like things like this, like the stream and the podcast and all my other projects. So I won't tell you too much about it right now, but what I will say is I just wanted to share with you that I am building it. And it's basically just a place, like the reason is because a fair number of people watch this stream, not that many, but there are a few people that are really into it. And I want to talk with those people more seriously. Like I want to know what they're actually thinking, and I want to follow up on these ongoing conversations and stuff like that. But it's fucking impossible when you like through Twitter DMs but then sometimes you get emails, and then sometimes you get comments on the YouTube videos beneath them. It's impossible keeping up with all of that, and you never really feel like you're fully there. Like you feel like you never feel like the conversations that are kind of like growing or accumulating or anything like that. Like you don't actually feel like you're building any kind of relationships or intellectual advancements. So yeah, I decided I needed to like take some positive action and actually organize one unified space where like anyone who's interested in this stuff that I'm doing and these ideas I've been kind of working on and pushing out for a bit, and who wants to, you know, help me like find interesting people to talk with and want to have debates or conversations afterwards and things like that. And also for like people to meet each other or whatever, people, you know, maybe don't have enough like private intellectual kind of communication and community. Yeah, I'm going to make one to basically kind of organize all of that. And yeah, I'm a little hesitant because I'm, you know, very conscious that these sorts of things can look like, you know, people are trying to build like personality cults or something like that. And it won't be that at all. I mean, I'm going to invite people that are like, you know, more than willing and interested in, you know, attacking me or criticizing me or whatever. It'll be totally open like that. And I won't even exercise like too much control over it, to be honest. But yeah, the basic idea is just that. Well, how should I put this? I mean, look, I think that anyone who is like putting stuff out on the internet in a consistent and disciplined way, who has like a lot of ideas and is really trying to build them, and people are responding to them, if that's happening in any way at all, like whether you like it or not, there's going to be kind of like group dynamics that kind of sometimes tend to look like cults. And I'm not like how should I put this? Like cultivating that exactly, but quite the contrary. Like I think being honest about those kinds of dynamics is an absolute necessity for actually like postponing at least, or hopefully forestalling altogether, then all the negative consequences of that sort of thing. So I have actually been interested in all kinds of like interesting provocative like group psychological experiments and stuff like that over time, but yeah, so it's not going to be a cult. Except insofar as like all content creators with any type of following naturally have cult-like tendencies. I'm just trying to be more honest about that in this reflection right now. The fact that that is a reality. Like any person who makes stuff and has a following and says, "Oh, nothing like that is going on at all," they're lying. They're liars, and that's like selfish, and that's manipulative, and that's when shit gets funky, I think, and disingenuous and twisted. So yeah, it will be organized kind of around the stuff I'm doing, but that's just because the stuff I'm doing has naturally brought out a good number of people who are currently, trying to talk with me and trying to collaborate and trying to do stuff with me, but on all these different platforms. So I'm just going to create a place where we can all do it together in one place. All right. So I'm still working on that. That's just a brief kind of explanation or summary of my current thinking, an informal reflection on what I'm doing there and why I'm doing that and what to expect. And so what I will say at this current stage, while I'm slowly kind of building it and bringing in people who are interested in this sort of thing, is if you're watching this, if you're one of the relatively small numbers of people who follow my stuff, and you haven't heard from me yet, just shoot me a message, shoot me a DM on Twitter, or shoot me an email or whatever. If this is the kind of thing that interests you, just having a kind of community around the stuff I'm putting out, I would basically, you can give me all kinds of feedback. You can help me decide what to do next, and I'll show you stuff that I'm working on, sooner than I'm releasing it here and in the podcast and stuff like that. So yeah, so just hit me up if that's something that interests you, and yeah, I'll get back to you. All right, so I know that's a lot of housekeeping, but that is because I have been thinking about this stuff for a lot of time over the past few weeks, I guess, as I've kind of been doing this more and more, and as I've been getting like positive response. So in about 8 minutes now, we'll invite Ben to join us. And we discussed today the topics that we wanted to kind of go over in Twitter DM, of course. And well, we'll talk about them as we go, but I guess I'll kind of get us started on one of them because I just got back from the gym, and I always get a rush of thoughts in the gym, like especially in the sauna or like the shower. I guess that's like a well-known thing, like shower thoughts. I don't know what it is about that causes that. But one of the topics that Ben and I were discussing in DMs today is kind of on my mind, especially at the moment from just a minute ago, just getting out of the shower not too long ago. So I'll talk about that. And if Ben's listening right now, then this will kind of be the intro, let's say the opening salvo in our exchange. If he wants, and if not, I'll just recap him when he joins us in a little bit. So one of the things Ben and I wanted to talk about is, well, I don't even want to say the name. It's I'm very uncomfortable with it, so I'm not going to say the name. But let's just say it starts with an I, ends with a W, and the middle word is dark, and it's a little trendy. It's a hashtag. I think you know what I'm talking about. Okay, I'll say it one time, but then I'm not using it in conversation because it makes me physically like cringe. And I'm not hating on it. I'll explain my thoughts in detail, excruciating detail right now. I'm not hating on it. I have a hard time saying certain things that I find just too cringy. So I'm talking about the intellectual dark web. Hashtag intellectual dark web. Hashtag IDW. That's what I'm talking about. I didn't even put it in the title, and I'm not going to use this language because, okay, look, I come from like a social movements background, all right? And in social movements, there is like a perennial issue of like people trying to start new types of groups, and they have a catchy slogan, and they have an aesthetic, and they have this kind of like centrally organized and planned image and name and structure. And it never, ever works. Okay. And I think in today's technological moment, this type of model for like building any type of community that's even, that even can be said to like exist in a meaningful way, is increasingly, it's increasingly obsolete. And basically, I mean, I think all the people that are associated with this idea are, interesting people, smart people, or whatever. So I'm not hating on anyone in particular. But kind of my opening thoughts, I guess, on this question that Ben and I wanted to discuss a little bit is that, there is something going on right now that is very much, like I know what they're talking about. There's definitely dynamics in society right now where there are all kinds of very dark, devilish, provocative, fascinating, dangerous intellectual currents kicking off right now all over the place, in largely, in response to, I think, a very long-term artificial suppression of the entire spectrum of human thoughts and feelings and values. So that stuff is bubbling up, no doubt. And so there's nothing wrong with giving that some sort of name. There is a lot of interesting networks of intellectual exchange that are happening, and they're interesting and fascinating and powerful and significant, newsworthy for sure. But like a small number of people who happen to have like a large amount of prestige, a large amount of followers or whatever. The idea that a small number of human beings who feel well poised to kind of like name it and identify with it and kind of own it. I mean, that's not going to work. Like that's just not how intellectual and social culture like operates nowadays. It's anything of intellectual significance, anything of like dynamic cultural significance that's taking place right now is completely emergent. It's completely spontaneous, decentralized. What is most interesting about the current moment is the escape of intelligence from all currently existing institutions. The idea that like a few, high visibility entrepreneurial individuals are going to like kind of try to corral the whole thing and kind of name it and think of it as a movement and try to steer the movement. That entire model no longer holds. And to be honest, I'm not, like I said, I'm obviously very interested in these things. I just think if there's a reality to what they call the intellectual dark web, if that's a real thing that's significant right now in the current historical moment, it's a completely uncontrollable, decentralized dynamic of basically intelligence itself becoming autonomous. It's not even really like a human organized thing. It's intelligence itself escaping all control through us in some sense. So yeah, I think a lot of the people who are associated with the movement that shall not be named, because it's not really an organized movement, I think they have an incorrect model. Basically, that would be my main critique. I think people like Eric Weinstein, super smart. I think he's especially interesting. I think his ideas are really, really interesting. He's actually written some very, very interesting stuff about capitalism. So I think, a lot, you all know, I think that I'm generally, quite into Jordan Peterson. I think he's like a very welcome kind of addition to the current public intellectual scene. Very sympathetic to his work. I've like listened to a lot of it and quite, enjoyed it. And, the rest of them, like this whole kind of ecology, I find it to be a more than welcome and salutary development and an interesting development that I'm generally, sympathetic to for sure. But the people that are trying to think about it as like an organized movement or kind of trying to like imagine that they're going to somehow steer it, like give that up completely. And this is why I think like in some ways the problem is like all the people that are identified as like the leaders of that, like they're kind of too old, to be honest. I'm not like being ageist or whatever, but like I don't think they understand like what's really going on in youth culture. Like even I'm 31 years old and I am already, I feel like too old to really understand things like, like how cultural dynamics are really bubbling up. Like for instance, like look at gamers, for instance, like massive gaming communities. Look at the emergence of something like esports as a completely like new type of industry and entertainment format. And I mean, these are like practices and cultures that are bubbling up in ways that like even people as young as me, 31 years old, can hardly like finding that out, like learning that esports is like this major, big competitive phenomenon that's like almost as big as like, major sports leagues. Like I only just learned about that. That's even a thing. I've only just learned about things like Twitch and all the people that are spending all this time like in, cultivating communities. And then that also spills over into these things like YouTube. Like there's a reason why, these, well, how should I put this? I have some other thoughts, but I won't. I'll pause it there. It's 8:30 now. I told Ben that we would have him in around right about now, and with his help, we can try to sort through this and some other. I have some other thoughts too, but I'll pause my blabbering mouth and now turn to the DMs to invite Ben. Ben, where are you at, dude? To be fair, I haven't given it to him yet. All right. By the way, sorry, I've been ignoring the chat. I'll look through it now and try to respond to some of the more interesting thoughts. All right. I've invited Ben, and hopefully he should be here soon. All right. What's going on in the chat? Jim, yes, I'm working on it. It's not quite ready yet. Ben, what's up, dude?
Hey, man. Am I live?
Can you hear me? Oh, sorry. My volume. What's up, man? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, man.
All right. Are you going faceless or are you going live? Totally up to you, man. No pressure either way.
I'll go live. I'm not sure how, but
you just got to click the video. Yeah, you're live now. I see you.
Okay. Hey, man.
What's up? What's going on?
I'm cool. I was just watching what you were saying about esports. Near where I live is a city called Katowice, and they have some kind of gaming convention. And I was talking to some people a bit younger than me, and they were going, "Oh yeah, we're going to meet so many gamers." And I was thinking of all the kind of people you want to meet in the world, celebrity gamers. But I'm an old man.
How old are you, if you don't mind?
27.
Oh, okay, you're younger than me. So were you listening to what I was saying? Do you want to just start by do you want to jump right in by responding to anything I was saying, or actually maybe better would be you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name's Ben. I was born in England, but I live in Poland. I've written for various publications, some of them associated with a movement that might have the initials IDW, okay, including Quillette, Aereo, the Catholic Herald, the American Conservative, Arc Digital, and some other smaller ones.
Brad, and what brought you to Poland? I'm just curious.
I was just offered a job. It was just chance, but I loved it so much that I stayed.
Oh, really? You like it there? That's cool. So do you mind if I ask what you do for a living?
I work in teaching.
Okay, cool. So do you teach English or?
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So how long have you been in Poland?
Coming up on 5 years.
Wow. So you must really like it. Are you like considering staying there forever?
I am, yeah, especially with Brexit looming, and I don't know. I don't have any enthusiasm to go back to the sinking ship.
Yeah, I hear you, man. No. I mean, I'm like a U.S. citizen, and I've been living here for 5 years, and Yeah, it does feel a bit like a sinking ship, doesn't it? I'm a little like I'm kind of like looking outward.
Mm. It is.
But
It is. Looking at Twitter though gives you a blinkered image because whenever I go back to England, it seems so normal. When I look at Twitter, it feels like it's just an apocalyptic wasteland with occasional parties for football.
yeah. So you do come back often or no?
A couple of times a year to see the family and
Right.
uh,
Right.
see friends.
So, okay, cool. So now people know a little bit about who you are. And thanks for joining me, I should say, by the way. I appreciate it.
No worries.
So it always helps to have like some other human energy with me. I mean, I can rant for like 2 hours by myself, easy, but I don't know if people like that. And you do start to run out of steam. So it's much better to have someone to dialogue with. Did you happen to hear what I was saying about the group that shall not be named? And did you have any comments on what I was saying, or we could just take
Yeah, I did listen to that, and I think you're right. I think of it more more as a kind of loose network of social clubs that happen to discuss ideas than any kind of coherent intellectual movement. And there is value in that. Like I really like Quillette. I quite like Jordan Peterson. I think we've all got 1,000 opinions on him now, but most of mine are positive. But there's also drawbacks to that. One of them is a kind of pretentiousness. Definitely when I listen to some of the more blatant self-promoters in the movement, like a man with the initials DR, it feels as if they're kind of as if they contain all dissident thought within themselves, which is very much untrue.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. That's I think I was kind of alluding to that also. You know, the way I see it is like also someone asked me earlier today in one of my channels, someone asked me like what is this idea of the cathedral? Like why do people use this word cathedral? And it occurs to me right now that this is a really good moment to actually answer that question because it connects to what we're talking about. Like in my view, there's been a long-term artificial suppression of thought and speech, like for quite a while.
Yeah.
And one word for that is, if you ask like who's doing that or what's doing that, it's a very simplified, very, very simplified shorthand, but it's not too simplified. And it's quite useful to say it's something like a cathedral. Which is, of course, Moldbug's word for basically like journalists and the media, higher education, and like nonprofit organizations, basically, as I understand it. Like these three sectors, if you will, for several decades now, have kind of slowly and increasingly kind of clamped down on what anyone is really like permitted to think or say in public. And still get like cultural accolades. And by the way, I think some of that is craziness on the street. Some of that is good. Like some of that, right, is associated with like a genuine long-term decline in things like racism, which is a salutary implication. It's a positive effect of this kind of trend. But also just like a lot of perfectly decent, normal, good people have had to kind of not necessarily even silence themselves, but they kind of fall away from these institutional organs of like what gets promoted as like good ways to think and influential, prestigious ways to think, right? So basically where I'm going with this is just to say that there has been this kind of long-term artificial suppression, and you can only suppress large numbers of human beings for so long until like things snap. Like I think Henry Miller said, like anything held together by force is doomed. Like in the end, things tend to, re-equilibrate. Pressure cookers tend to, they explode if you like try to suppress too much energy for too long. So all that's happening right now that, I think is the true like phenomenon behind what people are calling the IDW or whatever. There's a very real phenomenon, and that's basically just the escape of all of this like suppressed intellectual energy. And that's a mass phenomenon. Like that has nothing to do with any particular individuals. That's like thousands and thousands of people. So that's what I think.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And also, this definitely isn't the fault of everyone in the movement, for want of a better word. but some of them really play up the idea of themselves as dissidents and dark. And Barry Weiss's, or Weiss's, I don't know, profile in the New York Times with Sam Harris standing in a field, looking moody.
Yeah.
And they're really, most of them really aren't that controversial. And if they were that controversial, they wouldn't be getting sympathetic profiles in the New York Times. Like, Moldbug, for example, wasn't the edgiest person in the world, but there's no way they'd do a long profile with pictures of him standing in a field.
Yeah, and you know, again, like my background and like long experience in like social movements, it basically has inoculated me against all of this stuff, because what you see time and time again in the history of social movements is like, as soon as anyone starts getting cozy with like mainstream journalists, it's over. Like, it's all over. In terms of like significant, dynamic, dangerous cultural and social changes, or threats to power. You know, so it's like, I think that's, yeah. So I mean, that's why I'm kind of like, I have no interest in it, like positively or negatively, really. Like, it's like this sort of branding, this sort of branding type of project or movement. It's the exact opposite of where, like, if you're really interested in kind of like liberating thought and liberating speech and overthrowing, you know, like stupidly repressive institutions and unleashing intelligence and things like that, like if that's what you're all about, you'll run as far and fast as you can away from any type of like cool, you know, sexy, like journalistic marketing package, I think.
Yeah, I think the best way of looking at it in a healthy way is that it's the friends we made along the way, or whatever the phrase is. And we have our different avenues of intellectual inquiry, and we can support each other as we go down them. But it's not some kind of coherent body of intellectual or political activism, because I think people are so different that whenever, I mean, like Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris, for example, clearly incredibly different thinkers. So whenever they try and find common ground, it just ends up with an hour of backslapping about how open to free speech they are.
Yeah,
which doesn't really achieve anything.
I mean, you know what else I also tend to think, like, and as I said, I've followed all of this stuff like for the past year very, very closely. You know, I'm like an extremely online person, as they say, extremely online. I don't really like hang out with people very much at all, but I you know, read and watch things like a lot. So I've like listened to probably an embarrassing majority of the content that people like, you know, whatever Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan and these people have put out over the past like year or whatever. I have been following it quite closely, and one of the things that I've really been thinking is that one of the reasons why this kind of like centralized, kind of like high prestige or high kind of like high profile, high visibility kind of like packaging or marketing that's going on with this sort of phenomenon is so doomed is because all of these people, one thing that they all have in common is that I think they're all genuinely, they care a lot about, how should I put this? Like respectability, you know, they really do care. They still have a mental model in which there is like there's like a mainstream elite kind of like gatekeeping world. And the goal is to kind of like penetrate that, you know. Obviously, like like someone like Joe Rogan or whatever, like podcasting and YouTube is like a DIY affair for the most part. But the way that they talk and the way that they debate, you can tell that they're always kind of like, they're thinking about like, how can we get these ideas into the minds of like all the New York Times journalists? Like they think that's where the center of power, they still think that's where the center of power is. Like they're still kind of referring back to, I think, an institutionalized distribution of power that actually in my reading and my model of the world, it just no longer even holds. Like if I were them, like if I was fucking Eric Weinstein, I would just be on YouTube every day using my fucking genius, like galaxy brain to actually like make new theories and promote like new ways of doing a million different things, like on an everyday basis. But there's a reason why they're not really doing that stuff. Like there's a reason why they're not really seriously like generating new models and new ideas and new projects like with people in dynamic, growing, spontaneously emerging cultures. Like they're not doing that type of thing, and that's because their eyes are still on the on the center. Their eyes are still on this like imaginary center of power that they still kind of hold themselves hostage to. And to me, like the real exciting thing right now is like people just deciding to fucking break from that altogether and just go totally rogue. That's my
there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, if you want to have influence, you've got to build institutions, because otherwise everything is atomized. I mean, I guess if your sole interest is intellectual curiosity, then it doesn't really matter to you how influential you are, because you know, if you discover a truth, to some extent, it doesn't matter whether you're the only person in the world who knows it, because it's yours. But if you want to influence society, you do need to build institutions. But I mean, clearly they've shown that that can be done independently. Like, I think there are probably vastly richer publications than Quillette, which have smaller readerships, or someone like Dave Rubin or Joe Rogan. They have higher viewerships than much more respectable people, so they don't need that kind of status. I think when they did that profile in the New York Times, Alice Drager, who I don't know much about, to be fair, but she did put out a post saying, why do I need, I think it basically said, why do I need the New York Times to come and talk to me about what I'm doing and try to club me in with these other people who don't have a lot to do with what I'm doing.
Right. Oh, so was she approached to be in that article?
Yeah. I think she said they even sent a photographer to her, and she was just standing around thinking about how ridiculous it was. And I think she asked to be.
That's fascinating.
Not to be included.
I read her book. It's really good. She's really cool. It seems, from what I know from her book. And that makes me even more interested in her I guess ideas and stance and perspective. So that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that. So anyway, maybe we're being a little too gossipy, although we talked about another piece of gossip we're going to get to, which I think I'm quite interested in that piece of gossip, but maybe we should wait on that and take a break from the Twitter gossip and internet gossip, and maybe for a little bit talk about maybe some bigger thoughts or bigger ideas. Like, for instance, religion. You've written a lot about religion, but as I kind of said in the tweet for this, like, you're kind of interesting because for someone who doesn't believe in God or is agnostic with respect to that question, you sure write a lot about religion, and you seem to, really, really care about it. Like, it seems like you're really deeply wrestling with it, even though you don't count yourself a believer, if I understand correctly. Could you maybe just start by maybe telling our listeners, like, just give us a kind of elevator pitch about your interest in religion. Like, why do you write so much about religion?
So there are different levels to it. One is just personal background. I mean, I don't want to go on a tedious biography that will only be interesting to me. But I was raised religious, so I mean, I'm sure that affected my psyche. Then I became a Christopher Hitchens-esque, obnoxious anti-theist. But I'm sure it stuck with me in some way. On one level, I just find the question of God's existence fascinating and relevant, even if the affirmative answer is implausible. If there's a very low probability that it's true, it's still a very relevant question. And generally, when I read people writing about religion now, even in a sympathetic way, it's in a kind of Petersonian way where the allegorical truth of religion is what matters, and the actual question of God's existence isn't very important. It's just about the function of religion, and that's all that matters. But to me, if there's even a very small chance that there's an immense supernatural intelligence who may or may not expect certain things from our behavior and may or may not have some kind of surprise planned for us after death, that question is just fantastically important. And I'm definitely no expert on the philosophical debates behind it, but I see enough ignorance on the atheistic side that I'm not convinced there isn't merit to the question.
Okay. Yeah, that's well. That's, oh, sorry. Go on. You're breaking up a little bit.
On the other level, I think that if you are going to say that religion has functional value, but then you're going to say that the belief isn't important, I think it's going to be very difficult to maintain the same kind of values and the same kind of rituals without that belief binding it together.
Right, right. So where have you come down on this question? Like, what is your view on, like, what in your view is the accurate judgment on questions of faith and God?
I wouldn't even want to put that most tentative conclusion.
Okay.
I'm very interested in kind of Thomist metaphysics. There are different philosophers I respect a lot, like Edward Fazer from America. There's another philosopher I find very interesting called Alexander Proust, I think his name is, though I'm still so ignorant. I can't really understand his arguments, but they're clearly, there's such a level of sophistication behind them, which granted could be plain obscurantism, because sophistication isn't valuable in itself. But like I say, I still see so many just blatant fallacies from people on the atheistic side, the kind of what caused God level of argumentation, that I'm still very interested in learning more and keeping these debates alive, because I think I just written a piece with my friend Paul Bryan for Public Discourse magazine, which is about how apatheism is more dangerous to religion than atheism. Because now new atheism is a bit passe, and whenever anyone says something too Dawkins-esque, we'll post our Shrek Fedora memes at them if you've seen them.
Yeah.
But the danger of apatheism, where the question of God's existence is kind of taken off the table, is it's better to be having the argument than not having the argument, because you might not lose so many people so quickly, but it's a slow, inevitable decline if nobody's talking about it. So I want to reinvigorate those conversations.
That's really interesting. And I have a lot of respect for that, and a lot of personal kind of interest in your angle on that, because I'm kind of slow. I won't go into my own story too much either, but like I'm kind of currently, I guess I could say I'm slowly kind of moving back towards religion after like being, completely fallen from it for, a long time. And like, for instance, like I went to confession last week. I was raised Catholic, and, was like confirmed and everything when I was like 14. So I'm like, a member of the Catholic Church in some sense, but I gave that up when I, right when I was done with my confirmation, when I was like 14. That was like the last time I went to church. So I had, over the past couple of years, I've kind of gone a few times, because I have, as I said, I've been kind of moving back towards, just thinking a lot about it and kind of grappling with it. And I decided to continue like grappling with it more and more. And I decided like I would just go to confession, because why not? Like I don't want to sound glib, but that sounds glib. Like, and I don't want to be glib. Like I went, I was like, I'm leaning towards it. I'm curious, and I want to kind of, it's hard to describe, but I guess I do believe in God in some sense, but I don't know what sense yet, and this is where like Jordan Peterson, I think, is so good on this point, like, because it's something that you wrestle with. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's like, it's mysterious. Like, there are mysteries, Our existence is mysterious. There are unanswered questions, and I don't know, but it's like you're saying, Ben, like the stakes are high. Like the stakes are high. It really, really matters if you get it right or wrong. And we don't really know, but it's so confusing and it's so mysterious. So it's like, I take that seriously as all. And as I take it seriously, more and more kind of data in my phenomenology, I guess you could say, points in support of of a religious commitment. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm like, okay, let's just keep moving forward with it and see what happens, like with an open mind, you know? So I was like, I'll go to confession. You know, I'm like, I'm technically a member of the church. Like, I'll just go and I'll talk to the priest about everything I've done bad. And what could go wrong? Like, what's bad about that? That sounds like a good idea to do. Anyway, I'm ranting now about my own personal life, but that's like strong context for like where I'm at with thinking about these things. And I guess my punchline is just to say that whether you're agnostic or like a devout religious person or whatever, like, and I guess this is something that you and I will agree on, like, all you can really do is your absolute best to penetrate like the truth of the mysteries that we are confronted with. And maybe because they're mysteries, there's going to be a lot of like undecidability and a lot of like underdetermination of where people land. But all you can do is like what seems best to you given all of your data. And like, I think what I would like to kind of flesh out a little bit more by writing, this is something I want to write about in the coming months or years, is like how you can be religious and even a good religious, you know, devout, you can have a devout religious commitment and also be like very honest about your uncertainties and your incomprehensions and your kind of extra rational decisions that go into it. You know, like that's what I'm trying to do. It's like I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, because to some extent our beliefs must be extra rational. Like I believe in objective truth and the means we have to pursue those objective truths. And one thing I do believe is I think there are almost certainly objective ways of determining whether there is a God or not, philosophical ways, but there might not be in to some extent, the intellectual tools we have, in some cases, they might not be advanced enough that we can know what the truth is. And it's a bit like if you're standing on a hill and you're looking through the mist and you see things in the distance and you can't conclusively say what they are. And you'd be lying if you claimed that you could conclusively say what they are. But you know there are things and you can see, even if you can't see them properly. So even if you can't analyze things in a wholly rational way, you can still make some kind of, you can still maybe even have some kind of a prejudice, some kind of a guess, some kind of a prediction as to what they are without claiming that you can objectively prove it.
Right. I like that. I like that image a lot. Yeah. We have a question from the audience that I think is very urgent for you to answer, Ben. Alex Patterson wants to know, he wants me to hold you accountable for your problematic opinion that the album Home Like No Place There Is by the Hotelier is the best emo revival album. Can you please account for that? I don't even know who that is or what that is.
I'm sorry, it's just true. It's one of the greatest albums ever, in my opinion. Although that's a very niche opinion, I wouldn't claim that that's objectively true.
Are you a big fan of emo music?
The kind of, not the kind of emo where people are painting their fingernails and talking about their ex-girlfriends at excessive length.
Okay.
But, yeah, I am. But you'll have to ask him what he thinks is the best. Because.
All right, Alex, you can put that in the comments. I used to listen to a fair amount of emo music. Like when I was much younger, I used to listen to I used to be well into like Taking Back Sunday and like My Chemical Romance and what else? I used to listen to like Death Cab for Cutie and what other emo? Like Bright Eyes. That's what.
Oh yeah.
Right.
I think I did listen to My Chemical Romance when I was a lot younger, but also my first appearance in any magazine was in the NME calling Gerard Way a dick years ago. I can't even really remember the context, but I wrote some kind of letter saying that he was obnoxious and was very proud to see
Ben
Sixsmith says Gerard Way a dick or something. Someone
also is asking, why did I stop listening to emo? I I don't know.
You grew up.
Well, maybe I'll get back into it now. Maybe like I will spearhead the emo core wing of the intellectual dark web. I'll make like a big branded project around it. Yeah, maybe that's like
I think the most. I used to have Curious Cat for my sins, and the most difficult question I ever got is like, you call yourself a conservative and something of a traditionalist. How can you listen to emo? I didn't have a good response. I was just like,
that was when you quit listening to emo. That's funny.
No.
That's funny. So all right. So what else? I know we kind of chatted about a bunch of possible topics. What are you working on at the moment that you're kind of like most interested in, or what are you thinking about?
I got this article coming out fairly soon. I'm working on a big article about Poland that I don't have it placed, but I'm going to try and pitch it because it's the 100th anniversary of Polish independence this year, and I think the reaction in the Western press is going to be very negative because, rightly or wrongly, their political system is perceived very negatively. And I'm not going to comment on the political system because I'm a guest here, and I've been asked several times to write about their politics, but I think that would just be very rude. I compare it to walking into someone's house and then advising them on their marriage.
Yeah.
But it's about kind of Polish history and offering some kind of hope, encouragement to the future.
That's interesting. That's very fascinating what you just said, because you know what? Like, even living in the UK, like I have felt that myself about like Brexit, for instance. Like I don't even talk about it. I won't even really talk about it at like dinner parties. Like I just don't really have an opinion. I don't really weigh in at all. And I haven't really thought about it that explicitly, but I think there's a major part of me that thinks about it in the way that you just described. Like, it's really none of my business, and it's almost inappropriate for me to comment on it. Actually, I mean, an interesting point you might find interesting is like, as an academic, like most of my social groups are highly cosmopolitan. So, you know, like the university I work at, it's like half of the department is probably like not from England. Half might even be understating it. So like, you know, universities are these like very cosmopolitan international places, and everyone, you know, for the most part, not everyone, but most people in my contacts in academia in the UK are generally anti-Brexit. And they're more than comfortable commenting on it at length, you know, Facebook posts and in the halls, and, you know, like talking about how stupid Brexit is or how bad Brexit is. And, you know, part of me, I don't know if I've ever put this in words, but I think about it now that we're talking about it. Like, there's something really pretty fucked up actually about like a foreigner working in the UK and making a good income at like, you know, in pretty like competitive, hard to get jobs, and having like a extended, elaborate kind of like public opposition to like the judgment of the referendum, or to even have an opinion in it, because like they're interested parties. Like, I'm an interested party. It's like there's something fucked up about it. And interestingly enough, it kind of like it kind of makes me more sympathetic to Brexit, because I'm kind of like, you know, these British people think that their country's being like overrun by foreigners. And actually in academia, there's a little bit of truth to that. Not like poor immigrants. I'm talking about like high education, high income foreigners who have like all the academic jobs here. Like, I think it's quite reasonable for British people to resent that. And it's certainly not my place to like tell them they're stupid for wanting to kick me out. Like, I am taking their jobs, you know?
Well, I don't know if there'd be anyone suitable of taking your job, but I mean, I guess there's some level on which I'm sympathetic when they complain about Brexit, if it threatens them, because I mean, potentially it'll threaten me, so I can empathize with that. But definitely, you need to have a level of respect when you're doing it, because if you are living in another country, then you are a guest until you're a citizen. And I mean, I'll twist this by talking about English people abroad, and it always annoys me whenever I see some Anglo pop up in the American press talking at length about what Americans should do, from Hitchens to Milo to Louise Mensch to Piers Morgan to John Oliver. I mean, I think Trump should get on this Anglo invasion, build a wall in the Atlantic, kick them out, because I would be annoyed if I was American and I turned on my TV and I started listening to someone whose ancestors I'd violently broken away from telling me what to do with my country. It's pretty outrageous.
Right. Hey, I got to take a leak real quick. Could someone in the chat ask Ben a question that he can dazzle you with giving an answer to while I run to the bathroom? Hey, whoever just said in the chat that they don't like Jews, none of that. I need to learn how to moderate these chats. I've never really put much time or energy into this. But I guess I'm going to have to figure out a way to not let people say fucked up shit in the chat. People, don't be racist. Don't say fucked up shit like that, please. Well, I'm going to have to think about my policy on this. This is also sort of like off the cuff that I haven't really decided or given much thought to like what my free speech policy is in the chat. But I'll think about that. Someone ask Ben a question, please. So he can entertain you and entertain himself while I go to the bathroom. We can wait until then.
Okay.
So I won't just leave you hanging, and I won't like put it on you to like come up with some song and dance. The Triggerati asks you if you speak Polish yet.
I don't speak Polish yet, and that is a source of deep shame. I mean, it's a source of deep shame to me, and I've said it before, and I still haven't done enough to change that, because I can be very energetic about things, and then I can be very lazy about things. And for some reason, language learning is something I've been very lazy about. And as someone who wants to stay in Poland, that's definitely something I have to change, because it's quite easy to live there and not learn Polish, because I don't use it in my job. A lot of my friends I've met because they were quite excited to have the chance to practice their English, and a lot of people I meet and just become acquaintances, they enjoy the novelty of it. And then I know enough Polish where it's not impractical if I'm doing my shopping, or if someone wants directions. I'm not just blundering into the shop and pointing at food products and expecting them to hold my hand. So I don't think, or I hope it's not too inconvenient for the people I meet, but just to avert future problems, and so I can be fully integrated into my community, learning Polish is definitely something I need to do with the utmost energy. And I hope I've started doing that now with the aid of Duolingo and other clever apps.
Dude, I really like your attitude, Ben. Like, I love your like self-punishing, super self-critical attitude. Like how,
I mean, that's why I'm attracted to Catholicism, of course.
I totally get it. I totally get that now. And I mean, this is why I like conservatives as people, like good conservatives, like smart conservatives like yourself, because conservatives they care, like good ones, smart ones, like they just care a lot about like being, order and being good and doing the right thing. And like, they get angry at themselves and they get angry at others if they think that others aren't, or themselves are not doing the right thing. And I like that. I love that intensity. I love that kind of like self-discipline. I really appreciate that. And like, cause I'm kind of like temperamentally very much also like very lefty. I mean, I definitely have a kind of like, ethical, conscientious streak, like, which is one of the reasons why I'm also into Catholicism. But temperamentally, I have some like strong kind of like, let's just say relaxed attitudes towards some things. And just because of my job and stuff, like most of my milieu is like temperamentally very relaxed, let's say. So yeah, that's why I like hanging out with and talking with conservatives as much as I can, because I just love that kind of like ethical seriousness, I
mean, thank you very much first, but one risk to it is that you talk about how you've messed up, and then you don't change it, and then you go back to talking about how you've messed up. So I've done this with, I've often lamented, or I've often criticized myself for not learning Polish, and then I slump back into laziness or just a million other habits and sins that I've felt really bad about, and I've beaten myself up about it, and I went right back to them. So saying it counts, but actually doing it and changing it is what's significant.
Sure.
So, yeah, I have to be held accountable for this Polish thing. I should probably do some videos talking Polish and proving that I've changed.
Here's an interesting question from the chat. Do you think sports-based tribalism is good, bad, or neutral?
It's good until you start like beating the crap out of people in the street, which happens. Although even then, if people are beating the crap out of each other in a field, which I'm told sometimes happens in Poland, I guess if everyone's consented to it, it's not the worst thing in the world. Potentially, it could become like a lazy outlet for social instincts. But I think people who kind of mock sports ball are exaggerating the extent to which people are invested in sports. I don't think it's kind of replaced religion or nationalism or other tribal values. It's just a small expression of them.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to put it. I mean, I guess one way to frame the question about whether it's good or bad is to ask, like, does it move people closer to like ethical cohesion, or is it, yeah, kind of like more like a substitute? And I'm with you that it's definitely not, like, it's certainly not an actual substitute in anywhere near the proportions that like religion historically has been. But I think there's a good case to be made that it is basically occupying the same kind of neural and social circuits, just in a really like puny, pathetic, short-term, periodic way. So in that sense, like I tend to, I guess I tend to fall on the more critical side of it. Like, I mean, I'm not like trying to take anyone's fun away from them. I don't like, this is not like one of my pressing like talking points. But I do lean towards, just to answer the question, I do lean towards the view that sports tribalism is generally probably has a negative valence, I think.
Yeah, it could be like, there's a term for this that I've forgotten, but yeah, a replacement for instincts that could be funneled into a healthier direction. But I would be a very bad Englishman if I didn't say it's coming home.
Right.
Football is coming home. I mean, ironically, I was supporting Poland, and we went out in the first round, so I can't really celebrate if England win, but I still hope they do.
That's funny. We have one question here that is asking a very, very inappropriate, extremely rude question about the women in different countries, which I'm not going to ask here because I know that you would probably not like it, and I don't like it either. So sorry, we're skipping over that one. But here's a good one. What is your opinion, Ben, on anarchist primitivism?
Anarcho-primitivism.
Do you have an opinion? You don't have to have opinions.
Well, it's generally low. But I have a fear that they're right.
Really?
Because definitely there are technological trends which could go terribly wrong. Someone made me laugh and internally cry the other day just by posting a tweet that said something like, friendly reminder that every day there are thousands of nuclear warheads bristling in military bases that could wipe us all out in a moment. And I mean, there's that, and there's the potential for malignant superintelligences, or there's the risk of pandemics, and definitely there's a very good book called The Ingenuity Gap by Thomas Homer Dixon, which came out in the 1990s, which was about the potential risk that's building up within technological civilization, and the potential that we won't have sufficient ingenuity to be able to harness new powers for good or to defuse ticking time bombs. And To that extent, the anarcho-primitivists had a point, because if we were without this technology, we wouldn't have that level of existential risk. On the other hand, going from what we have now to anarcho-primitivism would be such an intensely bloody process that it would make, I don't know, it would make Ted Kaczynski look like the friendly old grandfather that some of these anarcho-primitivists think he is. So I really see the attraction. Right. But I don't know, maybe I'm just too much of a technological cuck or whatever. But.
Yeah, I could probably expound on like deeper stuff, but my immediate kind of instinct about it is I like the part of it that basically suggests I should not be working so much on like bullshit, like bullshit institutionalized, like mediated, alienated labor. Yeah, I'm highly sympathetic to that idea. But so as a justification or an ideology for me to like quit my job and like go buy a cabin in the woods, I like it.
I think we also, I mean, as much as what I've said about risk is true, it would be dumb to romanticize how life was before the Industrial Revolution and the technological revolutions, and reaching any kind of peaceable and any kind of peaceful state where all the needs of whoever's left alive are met would be incredibly difficult anyway. So I see the appeal, but it's much easier to tweet about than to go and live it.
Right. I think I kind of agree with something you said before, in that I think the anarchist primitivist like critique is probably right, in the sense that like, yeah, this whole like technological industrial society thing was probably like a bad idea. In the long run, it's probably a bad idea. Like I see this through like the Faust myth, you know, like I think it's a Faustian bargain. Like I think technology is a Faustian bargain. I mean, it gets you really good, attractive things in the short run that no one can deny. You know, it's a deal with the devil that you can't deny. It's too good to say no to. Like that's what intelligence is. Like intelligence itself, I actually think has that kind of structure. Like the intelligent exploitation of the environment to achieve something that you desire, like to promote your survival or whatever, using technology to like make food more plentiful and make society more stable and create better houses and promote all of these things that are undeniably desirable to human beings. Technology lets you do that. Intelligence exploitation lets you do that. And it also fucks you in the long run, because you end up making like structures that are that have a plan of their own, that's quite above you and quite outside of your control. To me, that's like the whole meaning of like the, you know, the in some sense, this is one of the whole meanings of religion to me. Like I see all of the world religions as kind of encoded systems trying to prevent precisely this catastrophe. Like it's all there. I mean, it's all there. I think I like the Faustian myth as like a especially kind of effective and colorful one. Like I think Goethe really understood that, you know, like modern intellectuals are really the representatives of this Faustian bargain. But yeah, so I'm very sympathetic to that. But now that it's like 2018 and I was born into this like technological industrial society, like I'm not gonna go live in the woods and like shit in like a composter or something like that. I'm gonna ride this.
It's a bit like walking up a mountain and getting into trouble, and then someone saying, "Wouldn't it be better if we hadn't climbed this mountain?"
Yeah,
yeah. But we're on this mountain.
Right.
There's not much we can do about it.
Yeah, and also it's like, yeah, exactly. Another metaphor here that I like is like the genie's out of the bottle, you know?
Yeah.
So like putting it back in. So yeah, but I don't know. I am kind of interested in and open to some of the more interesting and intelligent, like kind of back to the land projects, but with like technological bents, you know, like people who are experimenting with ways to live off the grid that are, it's not just like hippie bullshit, but it's like technologically sophisticated. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of like the decelerationism kind of like movement or whatever.
No, I've heard of accelerationism, but not there.
On Twitter, it's called like DEC. So like accelerationism is usually marked ACC, and there are some people now that like talk and write with this like slogan of like DEC, which is short for deceleration. And I'm trying to talk with some of them. I need to email some of them because I really want to hear what they're doing and what they think. But it's basically anarcho-primitivist types of people. But I don't know. Some of them seem like kind of interesting and kind of like promising. Like my wager or feeling or just my intuition is that like maybe, and this is just an open empirical question, but maybe like the technological gains that we've been blessed to have can be, perhaps if you're really creative and courageous and willing to like buck the trend of modern society as a whole, can be repurposed for like sustaining like much better, healthier human communities. If you'd have to be willing to basically like totally re-engineer things in a like really creative way. I'm open to that. I definitely, my priors want to believe in that. I would love to hear that.
I definitely think it will come to that or something catastrophic. Like, I want to believe that we can control the future of technology. I'm not convinced that we can. But if we can, then we should try at least. And unless you're a pure cold-blooded accelerationist, and you just want to see the world zap into a puff of software or whatever. I don't know.
So something really funny just happened in the chat, which I need to tell people about. Basically, someone asked us to talk about whether women are hotter in Poland or Hungary. And that was what I said before that. I said, I'm not going to ask this because Ben is a conservative, and I can tell from his temperament he would not appreciate this somewhat arguably rude question. So that was what I was referring to before when I said I'm not going to ask it. And then guess what? My mother-in-law appeared in the chat. my mother-in-law, her name's Sharon. Bless her. She's very sweet, very cool. If she's still listening to this, hi, Mom. But you know, you don't expect your mother-in-law to appear in like your YouTube streaming chat when you're talking about like accelerationism.
I will tell one funny story related to that question, which is a few years ago on Eurovision, the Polish entry was a very weird song about Slavic women. And when they were performing this song, it was all of these young ladies coming out dressed in kind of revealing takes on traditional clothes and all churning butter for some reason. And the next day I woke up and I think like 2 or 3 of my friends had sent me messages saying, "Oh, Ben, Poland, huh? Been thinking about coming over." And I had to message back and say, you know, they don't actually dress like that and just stand in the street churning butter.
Well, but is it like palpably and significantly like a much more traditionalist society? Like, is that one of the things that you like about it?
I think in the cities it's more traditional, but you could often forget it if you're going to a bar, if you're going to a club. You could quite easily forget that you were living in a Catholic country. On the other hand, if you walk past a church on a Sunday morning, it's always so full that people are spilling out of the doors. Whereas if you walk past a church in England on a Sunday morning, you can probably see the moths flying out the door and 2 very old gentlemen sitting inside. So sometimes the traditionalism is brought home to you. But also it's much more pronounced in the countryside than in the cities. So the countryside can be very traditional in some ways, whereas the cities are more, slightly more cosmopolitan.
And does this bleed into your life there? Like, do you enjoy a feeling of like a more traditional society or no?
Yeah, in many ways. I'm not sure how I could put it into words, but yeah.
Yeah, I
guess I do. But I'm not sure how I could articulate it. But it's on levels like, so this isn't connected to the women question, but there's definitely less neuroticism about speech codes when it comes to discussing ideas. People are just happier with their country, not necessarily like how much money they're getting or what kind of personality their boss has, but just on the level of being patriotic. There's more of that. And there's probably more of an instinct towards starting families and settling down than kind of lad culture or wine mum culture, to use nasty phrases. But on the other hand, they still have like a reality TV show called Warsaw Shore, which is a rip-off of Geordie Shore and a rip-off of Jersey Shore. So it would be naive to think it's like Catholic paradise.
Right. Fair enough. Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, when I was saying before that my mother-in-law appeared in the chat and she came in to own the guy who asked the question, Triggerati. Yeah, she came in to try to own Triggerati. And the reason I mentioned it was because she followed it up with, she said, that objectifies women. Why don't you ask which women are more intelligent? And then I'm like, Sharon, you're not allowed to say that nowadays either. Like, there are no intelligence differences between populations. That is a no-no, Sharon. You're not woke enough. I'm just kidding, Mom. You're good. You're woke enough in my book. I'm not woke either. Being not woke is cool if you're still listening to this. Actually, being not woke is all the rage. Actually, Mom, you're in the intellectual dark web now. Congratulations. If you think that populations have intelligence differences across countries, you're intellectual dark web. IDW, my mom, hashtag it up. All right. Enough about that. We were just talking about, we're getting some questions about, do you follow accelerationism stuff or no?
Yeah, from a distance.
You know Nick Land's work? Yeah,
I know Nick Land's work. No, I haven't read all of it, but
sure.
I've read a lot of his blog, and I I don't even know how to pronounce it. Numena?
I would say Nomina, but I think different people say it differently.
Which was definitely a wild ride of a book. But yeah, I follow it to some extent.
I was just curious because someone's asking us to talk about it. I talk about his work enough. But if you have any thoughts, you could throw them out, or if you don't.
I mean, I find it interesting just on a descriptive level of what could happen. I think the clearest models of what could happen are often from people who have very dark tendencies because they're not biased by sentiment or optimism. So I think it's very interesting as a potential model of the future. On the other hand, I wouldn't actually I don't find it appealing on an emotional level.
Fair enough. Cool.
I think there was some guy who once wrote a big book about a civil war breaking out between people who supported superintelligences and people who didn't. And I think if that war broke out, I'd be on the opposing side. So.
Okay, good to know. Good to know where you stand. As I said, I talk about that stuff enough, so I don't need to go on a rant on that. So what I'm thinking is we should maybe move on to the next topic. What do you think?
Yeah, that's it.
We can move on to the final topic that you and I kind of roughly planned, which is talking a little bit about woke academics. And, as an academic, as a fairly woke academic even, I mean, I guess I'm not woke, hashtag not woke, but as a somewhat woke academic or former woke academic, whatever you want to call it, this is actually a little bit of turf that I feel like I have a little bit of expertise on because, well, how should I put this? The expertise would be on, I have a little bit of expertise, I think, on the psychology of academics because I've written about this and I've thought about it a lot. And I've been in the game for like 5 years now as professor, lecturer, whatever. And while I've been kind of like fucking off on the work I was supposed to be doing, I've mostly been thinking and reading about like what is really going on with the people around me in this like strange place. So that's one thing I'll say, that I have some claim to speak on this. Like, I don't know if you happen to see, about a year ago, I wrote an essay that like got a lot of traction on the psychology of prohibiting outside thinkers. I don't know if you would have come across it then, but it was like a fairly widely shared blog post that basically addresses like exactly this question of like, why do academics as a whole tend to kind of close the ranks like so aggressively against all possible outside, intellectual projects. And at the time, I actually wrote that in response to the people I had in mind were like people like Nick Land and Moldbug, who I was reading at the time and was very, impressed with the intellectual sophistication and the just the sheer, I guess, sophistication and interest of it all. It was clearly, smart people like making serious arguments at length in a disciplined way. So it's like that's more than enough to qualify for like being worthy of consideration, worthy of note even. So I was really interested in I was reading them at the time, and I was very much like, I was surprised, like, whoa, there are these like super smart, kind of crazy people writing like pretty long, serious stuff on the internet, even though they're not academics, even though they're not getting paid to do it, even though they're like shunned by like prestige intellectuals. There's like a lot of really good intellectual crazy stuff going on out on the internet. And it's interesting and exciting. And I was like into it. So I was reading, that's when I was getting into like neo-reaction and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the reason I'm going on this long diatribe is because back then I wrote some stuff about this, like really trying to think through why academics are so rabidly and kind of instinctually able to kind of like shit on and eject and reject all forms of intellectual culture bubbling up that don't have the stamp of approval of academic prestige. And so that's where we're going with this. So this dust up recently, like this guy Matthew Sears, who's like been on quite a tirade, like shitting on or trying to like shit on outlets like Quillette or whatever. I think they're mostly like cell phones, as they say. Like, I don't think, I think his like obsession with attacking people like Quillette or whatever is like, it shows much more that he's actually like quite obsessed with them in some sense. Like he's, I think it's like quite a self-own when academics are like going on and on trying to kind of like exercise like intellectual activity outside of academia. It just, there's something symptomatic there. It's kind of like, because if you really don't respect something, you just don't pay any attention to it. I mean, you won't even look at it or acknowledge it. So there's always something deeper going on under the hood when academics are like really trying to shit on intellectual activity happening elsewhere. So that's why I'm interested in this sort of phenomenon, because there's a lot of it going on, one, and two, I generally don't get personal with my stuff. Like I generally don't attack people by name, and I don't want to like, make things like about like interpersonal fights or whatever. But this guy came to my attention because he's getting really personal. He's like attacking Quillette, like the editors of Quillette, like Claire Lehman. He's like attacking people like her, like pretty aggressively and pretty personally. So it's like, when I see that sort of stuff by an academic, and then I'm like, I'm very interested in all of these people and these like this like non-academic like intellectual ecology. I actually do feel a little bit of an obligation to like, as an academic, to say like, whoa, hey man, like, cool your jets. And so, yeah, we just talked about, you and I talked about like discussing this a little bit more. But I just gave a little bit of a rant. Do you want to talk about this like larger topic at all?
Yeah, the one thing I'll say in Sears' defense is, I think he got attacked first, but it was by Nazim Nicholas Taleb, who is just incredibly rude to everybody. And you wonder how anyone puts up with him. I'm sure he's not the same in real life, but he's entertainingly rude on Twitter, but probably not if you just get targeted by him.
But also,
I think the deeper motivation, which I think Oliver Traldi said first, who's at Ortois on Twitter, is when they disagree with something like Breitbart, they might hate the content, but they don't feel it as any kind of rival, any kind of competition. But when you get a website like Quillette, a website like Aereo, a figure like Jordan Peterson, it's like someone moving into their space, and they need to aggressively close ranks to keep this kind of contender to their thrones away.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly what I wrote about, like at length in that essay that I mentioned that I wrote about a year ago. I think you're 100% right. And like my reading on it basically is that if you're an academic and that's your job and that's your status and you're highly invested in that identity, you have a lot of anxiety right now because the pitchforks are out. Like there has never been so much mistrust towards academia, especially from conservatives. And like all of the mainstream institutions, like people have very, very low trust in the media, but also, you know, they kind of lump in academia with that. Like this whole kind of populist right-wing backlash that you're seeing in the UK and in the US, you know, people's critical sights are on, you know, not just the politicians, but also the media and also academia. It's kind of seen as like this big corrupted structure. And, you know, anyone who's been inside of it knows that there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, even leftists like in academia, like there's a left-wing version of this and there's a right-wing version of this, but most people who've gotten an inch, you know, away from academia, let alone inside of it, know that this is like a fucked up system with all kinds of lies and dubious, you know, like consensuses that you know, it's like sometimes it's like Soviet Union level kind of like collective delusion that defines academia. And it's not even necessarily like left wing or right wing, although it's tends to be left wing because of the composition of the people in academia. My point is just to say that like there's a strong sense within academia that like a lot of things are unsustainable and people don't feel secure and people are a little paranoid. And you know what? Like they're kind of reasonable to feel so, because especially if like you're a classics scholar and like your expertise, the reason you make like a good paycheck over like the average person in your country is because you have like rarefied knowledge of something that doesn't itself like produce money. Like if that's your claim to a middle-class lifestyle and status and your identity, you are gonna be actually quite rational to fight tooth and claw to protect the institution that sponsors you, even though that institution is filled with fucked up problems and all kinds of issues that even horrify leftists on the inside. So when you start to see that like there are non-academic institutions generating serious intellectual activity and a whole ecology or community of upstart intellectuals of all different stripes who are actually, and this is what I think really terrifies people, there's so many people who write for Quillette and write on personal blogs and just write all over the place and talk all over the place, YouTube even, who are seriously smart people. There are some really smart people, like really high IQ people who can put together interesting ideas and arguments and have the discipline to constitute like meaningful cultural projects. Like this stuff is happening. There are people doing it and they don't need academic approval. And it's really growing and growing. And so like if your entire paycheck and identity is based on a rarefied institution, like defining you as being smarter than other people, you're actually quite rational to fight tooth and claw against things like Quillette. Like it makes sense why you would be foaming at the mouth against Claire Lehman, because she's just like a random smart educated person who decided to put together a website and create space for people that are not like allowed into academia or whatever. Like, yeah, it makes sense that people are rabidly and instinctually just kind of like throwing down the ranks and doing everything they can to stop that and to decredit that or delegitimate that as much as possible. So I'm sympathetic to that. I'm actually quite sympathetic to it. Like I understand where he's coming from. But like you can't lie and you can't smear shit. And the whole like performance of it is just so disingenuous that you know, I'm kind of getting a little bit more into the idea of maybe calling people by names. And, you know, this is what I think Taleb is like quite good at. You know, he's like an asshole, but he writes about how like with some things you gotta call a spade, and you need to name names. And I'm kind of becoming sympathetic to that, because this guy like Matthew Sears, like I'm sorry, but like people can see through your performance. Like, we know what you're really doing here. Like, we know what your real interests are. We know what, like, the underlying psychology is not that hard to see. And I think people should, you know, maybe respectfully and constructively, but perhaps somewhat aggressively, if that's appropriate, like call out bullshit, you know, by name.
Yeah, there's been a more kind of positive response from the academia. I don't know if you noticed the Heterodox Academy conference.
I saw about it, yeah.
Which were basic. I mean, the irony of the conference is that nobody there really had heterodox opinions. It was a group of academic leftists, a couple of liberals. I think there were no conservatives, but I could be wrong. There might have been a minority of conservatives. But they weren't heterodox themselves, but they appreciated that the academy has to be more heterodox, more inclusive to other perspectives. All those other perspectives will just go somewhere else. Personally, I think it might be a good thing if those perspectives just go somewhere else, which is kind of what you were saying in the beginning. You don't need to seek that kind of respect. But there's definitely a recognition of that. And then the flip side is people like Sears who are just lashing out and trying to discredit other publications or other personalities. And it's going on what you were saying about calling out people by names. It's quite nice for a lot of us who do write for these new publications, because we're not in any kind of institutions and we're very much outsiders. So we don't really have any kind of social pressure or guilt about calling people out by names. Right. Although, of course, it should be done, and it should be done in a polite and, if someone deserves it, respectful manner. I'm not advocating just random insults, but
I'm with you 100%. Like, so that's why I wanted to mention this guy Matthew Sears, who we're looking at now. Good looking chap. I got nothing against him. Not going to criticize his appearance, although I do want to talk a little bit about his fashion sense, but from a respectful and constructive place. For instance, like, I don't know, but I'm dubious about, or I'm skeptical, I should say, of academics who wear like ties. I think some people can pull it off, and some people it makes sense. For instance, Jordan Peterson likes to wear a nice 3-piece suit sometimes. I've noticed he's definitely got a stylist. He wears some like posh, formal wear. But the thing with Jordan Peterson is he leans culturally conservative. So I believe it. Like, I get where it's coming from. I think he genuinely believes in having a disciplined appearance and dressing like a professional. But if you're like woke, and you wear a tie, I'm sorry, but I'm not saying you're a bad person, and maybe you're worthy of trust. But on the face of it, if you're woke and you wear a tie, I don't trust you off the face of it. My subjective estimation of you, my trust of you subjectively is quite low. And the reason is precisely because if you're woke and you're also like performing a kind of like defense of currently existing respectable institutions, then you're almost by definition playing the typical like bourgeois hypocritical game. If you actually really care about injustice and, equality and, freedom for all and these kind of like woke progressive ideals, then it's quite an affront to rock up to your like institutionalized academic job looking like a businessman, because you're basically doing like performative ideology for an institutionalized system that like you're supposed to have no respect for. So it's like, if Jordan Peterson wants to wear a tie, okay, I get it. It's consistent with his temperament and his overall message. But if you're woke and you think like the world is based on injustice and like all of contemporary capitalism is based on a history of unequal exploitation, and it's like white supremacist to its roots and patriarchal to its roots, and this is like the cultural energy that you're trafficking in, then don't wear a fucking suit. Don't take yourself so fucking seriously. That's kind of my 2 cents. Which is why, you know, like, as you can see, I don't even like shower as much as I should probably, and I kind of rock up to the internet with like stained shirts and you know, I'm not like, you know, proud about those things. I'm not like, oh, I'm cool, lefty, like nonchalant, like surfer skater bro, just doesn't give a fuck bro. Like I'm not that either. I'm just, in my view, if you're really passionately opposed to like institutionalized status quo injustices, I think you should be like, how should I put this? Like a real intellectual who like leans left should not be caring about things like how you appear and looking respectable and looking polished and professional. You should just be like reading all day and writing all day and not giving a fuck. That's like the proper way to be a lefty intellectual. The honest way to be a lefty intellectual is to just like, to be rebellious, to not care what people think, to dress however the fuck you feel like, and just get so obsessed with your own thoughts and reading and writing and making connections with people online. And just like, that's the aesthetic and the ethics and I think politics of like a genuine radical left kind of like cultural project. And that's my rant on that.
I just worry that if you told a bunch of middle-aged male academics to dress in a more relaxed way, they'd rock up in leather jackets, and soon they'd be driving motorbikes and starting covers bands, and that kind of repressed midlife crises would just burst out. Maybe the suit is the only thing that's holding them together.
Maybe, although, no, you know what, though? I think my theory holds even if you look at like the data, the behavioral data of academics, because generally, like, the most legit intellectuals that I know in academia dress like slobs, basically, or at best they're just very relaxed. They look like completely normal dudes, normal dads or whatever, or wives or mothers or whatever the fuck. I didn't mean to gender that. I slipped up. Sorry, people. That was a legitimate sexist gendering. Sorry, it was unconscious bias.
Hashtag sleep.
Hashtag what?
Hashtag sleep.
Hashtag sleep. Hashtag
The
me
opposite
too.
of woke.
Hashtag woke. Yeah. So anyway, what I was saying is that I think this theory actually holds up, that like the most legit intellectuals just look like normal people. If you go into academia, like if you walk around universities, all the people that there's a correlation. Like the more dressed up you are, the more of like a bullshit like administrator you are. I think that really holds. I think that generally holds up.
I haven't been on a university campus in nearly a decade, so can't really comment. I don't know what they're wearing.
Fair enough.
It's a foreign country.
Fair enough. Oh, and also just since we're like still in gossip mode and calling people by their names, I just want to show that I said before, like this guy Matt Sears is obsessed with Quillette. Like if you Google Matthew Sears on Quillette and look at like the search results that come up, it's like tweet after tweet of him mentioning Quillette. You know, like this is not a guy who, you know, has genuine contempt for outside startup intellectual projects that he sees as like, you know, unworthy. Like this is a guy who's like obsessed with possible competition to his like status, I think. Because you just don't talk so much shit about something that you genuinely see as unworthy. That's my read anyway.
Hello?
So, yeah, you got me? Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, I lost you for a moment. The thing he said, which really annoyed me, which I ranted about on Twitter, but I'll repeat it here, is he was saying that publications like Quillette claim to be free-thinking and engaged in like radical intellectual inquiry, but actually they're just flattering people's prejudices. And I don't know if he's aware or not that when he writes something which is very woke, it's not like all his readers are reading it and go, wow, my God, my whole paradigm has shifted. He's flattering people's prejudices as much as anyone is, because whatever opinion you hold and whatever conclusions you reach, you're going to flatter someone's prejudices, because we all have different preconceptions, and sometimes our prejudices are right and sometimes they're wrong, and that's not what's important.
Yo, I mean, honestly, I wonder if he would talk with me. I would be happy to talk with him. Like I obviously disagree with him in some ways. I guess I'm somewhat provocatively saying that I think what he's saying is disingenuous and he's playing a different type of game than he pretends to be playing. I guess I've in some sense accused him of doing that, but it's not from a bad place. Like, I'm sure he's a smart guy. I'm sure he's a nice guy. I'm sure he doesn't mean, I'm sure he, would be quite interesting to talk with, and I would be happy to talk with him with an open mind. But I wouldn't, honestly, he's the type of guy who I wouldn't really even think to ask to talk with me, precisely because he seems to think that like anyone who does stuff related to these like, topics and networks is like evil or like shouldn't be talked with. So I interpret him as kind of saying like he's not interested in having this conversation because he sees like, I don't know, maybe he even sees me as like an illegitimate like apologist for who knows what or something. I don't know. But my point is like, I would be happy to talk with him. But the only reason I'm not like, talking with him or asking him to be on here or whatever is because I imagine he's not into it. But maybe
he does keep arguing with people on Twitter, so he might be interested in coming on, I guess. As long as he's not like really fond of his tie. And he's gonna watch you talking about his clothes, and he's gonna be like, right, that's out.
Oh no, did that
don't insult my clothes.
Is that how I crossed the line? Shit.
I don't know.
Maybe could someone in the chat that's watching this who's like at all adjacent to Matthew Sears, and maybe you could like, don't all do it. I'm not telling you to get on him at all. Don't do that. I'm not at all saying that, but maybe someone could like tweet at him and ask him if he wants to come in here right now. He could join us for like, we could have a, very relaxed and mature and open-minded conversation about it if he wanted to join us. I mean, I'm sure he's like not just like sitting around the internet waiting for this sort of like opportunity to do this. Right. Yeah. Although actually, I mean, he's so game on Twitter that he might actually be ready and available.
He does seem extremely online.
Could someone tweet at him? Just like one or two of you tweet at Matthew Sears and say that me and Ben would like to talk with him in person if he's willing right now. I could give him an invite link right now if he wants to.
Sometimes I do watch like these YouTube debates and streams, and it is amazing how available people are. I kind of imagine them just sitting next to their computers, just waiting to drop in. Right. I mean, can you imagine if you were at a party and like there were people just standing behind different doors, and someone said, "Hey, bring Sargon in," and you just open the door and there he was.
Yeah, yeah.
But we'll see.
No, you're right. It's so interesting and it's so cool. Like, it's so obvious to me. I tend to talk about this a fair bit, so I won't harp on it. But like, it's so obvious to me that blogging and video chat and stuff like this is like, if you're really interested in intellectual advancement and making new ideas and making new connections and solving thorny problems and stuff like that, like, it's so obvious to me that these tools are still being radically underutilized by like serious prestige, respectable scholars and academics, that it's like, that itself is, I think, a pretty damning indictment of what the fuck all these academics are even doing with their time and energy. Like, it's clearly not, like take the typical academic conference, for instance. It's like this really long, difficult to organize, expensive to organize affair, like at a hotel in like one city in the world, where like thousands of people spend thousands of dollars to get there, to give like a 5-minute paper to like 5 other people in the room, and it's like extraordinarily expensive and uses so many resources and achieves a horrifyingly small amount of intellectual production and stimulation. It's like, well, okay, well then what the fuck is really going on here? Like, what are these people really doing? If it's clearly not intellectual work, like it's not trying to maximize intellectual connection, and it's not trying to maximize it seems like it's trying to maximize the amount of money spent. Like, honestly, like if you look really honestly at it, that's kind of what it looks like. And then you get into academia and you go to these conferences and you realize that actually it is kind of just like vacations for people. Like it's a way for people to get away from their kids and to have like drinks at the bar with like people they went to grad school with. Like it's mostly a massive, big, expensive boondoggle for like us, for like an interest group to go on vacation. I mean, I don't want to sound too technical, but you know,
maximize other forms of communication.
Well, yeah, but
so,
I think
social or if the gossip is true, sexual or
definitely, yeah.
But it depends on the academics.
Well, I have this kind of theory though that I think like increasingly doing this kind of stuff that you and I are doing right now will actually become a kind of signal of genuine intellectual interest. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're spending like right now, people just don't really know how to interpret these signals. So everyone still kind of imagines that academics are at least like trying to optimize like intellectual goals. Because, you know, we update very slowly and there's like all this historical inertia in our mental models. You know, but like, I think it will increasingly become clear that like, if you're an academic and you're spending your time like going to like big costly conferences and stuff like that, like it will actually lead people to downgrade their subjective estimation of your like intellectual quality. because it's like understood correctly, it's actually a pretty strong sign that like whatever it is you're trying to maximize, it's not really like the intellectual life. But if you're like willing to just fire up YouTube and get on the mic with like some other random but interesting and intelligent seeming person, like if that's what you spend all your time doing, that's increasingly going to be seen as a signal, as a credible signal of like, okay, this might be like an interesting, intelligent person who's actually like on the tail of something quite interesting that I want to pay attention to. You know what I mean?
I'm completely guessing here because I don't really know much about the internal workings of universities. But I wonder if because they're so expensive, it's like a signal of how much you're prepared to invest in working with other people. It's almost like a hazing ritual, maybe. Just investing so much time and money in this rather pointless little affair shows how much you're prepared to commit to maybe not this field, but this this network of academics. But I don't know, that's just a guess.
I definitely think you're right that there is something like that going on. I mean, there's no doubt that prestige economies are like a historically necessary and effective selection mechanism. You know, like in a world where only so many people can have access to like the microphones that broadcast to the population, there needs to be some device or mechanism for selecting like who's going to get the right to talk. You know, I think this this makes sense even as late as like the 60s, like when television and like broadcast systems were like the dominant kind of like media form. It kind of makes sense, like for most of history, like you do need some, like there's so many people, everyone's got a message, everyone's making noise. There's got to be some way to determine like who's got the high quality signals that we want to pay attention to, and who should get the platform, and who shouldn't get that platform. And I think prestige economies have been like a long-standing solution to that. And I think that's what you said. What you said applies there. Like you set up all of these costly obstacles, these time-consuming, money-consuming, energy-consuming challenges, hoops to jump through. And like, if you can rise to the top of academia, despite all of the anti-intellectual roadblocks, well, that's a pretty good sign that you're, you know, fit. That's a fitness indicator, right? It kind of makes sense and it kind of works in some ways. But the thing is that the game is totally different now, and it's still, people are still not updating to it. Like some people talk as if like the internet is like old news, but it's not. It's like barely begun. People have barely begun to update their models and their behaviors around it, I think. And I think this is a really good example of how that is the case. This is one data point in that. In other words, like, yes, to get into academia, you do have to do all of this song and dance and it's like a legacy selection mechanism to prove that you are smart and disciplined and able. The thing is that you don't need to do it anymore. So if
for intellectual inquiry, you don't need it.
Yes. So if you are doing it, then the question becomes, what are you actually trying to do? Like, what are you actually trying to maximize? And the answer is, now I think the answer is increasingly clear. The answer is you're trying to maximize your influence and your power. Like that's the only reason why you would submit to like a whole life of bowing before like time wasting, energy wasting stupidities that academia is. And this is coming from someone I'm actively doing this. Like, and to be perfectly honest, not to toot my own horn, but I'm successful too. Like I'm like a very successful early career researcher who's like, I'm succeeding as far as the game goes. So this isn't like sour grapes. It's just observing honestly like what's going on around me. And that's why I'm turning to the internet so much right now, because I'm kind of like, wait, someone pinch me. Is this really what's going on? Like, is the world really the way it honestly looks to me, or am I missing something? Because my attitude is just kind of like, yeah, like there's nothing wrong with wanting influence. Well, maybe I think there is actually something wrong with wanting influence and power, but I guess what I'm getting at is like many people go into academia thinking like you need to do this to be able to have a job where you're able to, work on your ideas, and those ideas are going to have effect and influence and be recognized and have significance. Like it's reasonable enough to think I need to go through this prestige competition to earn the right for my ideas to have an effect in the world and for me to have a job and related to it. Like that whole reasoning is like fair enough. It's not necessarily perverse, evil, will to dominate or something like that. But when you get there, when you're doing that and you get there and you're like looking around, and once it becomes clear that like you can actually have a very, non-trivial platform just by doing good work on the internet, like just doing honest, good work that you're interested in, that you believe in, doing it on the internet and doing it seriously, like that really it does bubble to the top. Like it does get you probably as much influence as the average academic has. The academia is not exactly a very reliable pathway to influence. Like most academics don't have any influence. So it's like,
I think that's definitely true. I mean, I was a complete academic failure for one reason or another.
Oh yeah.
And after that, wondered about going back, but never did.
Interesting.
But I mean, if I'd gone and tried to do an MA, tried to do a PhD, might have been good for my career. And also, to be fair, maybe I could have created something more substantial. But, it might have been read by 10 people if I'd written a PhD, whereas, not to blow smoke, but when you write something for somewhere like Quillette, you end up getting thousands of readers, and relatively influential people end up reading. So I hope that's not why I do it, but it's nice, You don't have to go through the process to get that reach.
Yes, exactly. And like whatever your temperament is, whatever your politics are, it doesn't have to be Quillette. It can be any other platform. Like there's a wide diversity of just fairly random like intellectual startup platforms on the internet, or you make your own, whatever it might be. What this all boils down to is that like there is no reason to submit to like anti-intellectual competition procedures to enter into this like ancient traditional selection competition, when unless and this is what I think is so interesting and important for people to realize, unless like you're trying to optimize something else. And the puzzle is like what are they trying to optimize? And this is why I'm so interested in the psychology of academics, because I've kind of like arrived in academia and I got lucky. I worked hard, yes, but I also got lucky. And like a lot of it is like very, very much a lottery in terms of like getting a tenure track position. And I lucked out. Like I won the lottery also. So now that I'm there, I'm kind of like, I'm like looking behind the curtains, and I'm like, this can't be real, right? This is not like what this is actually like. So I'm just like trying to figure out like where the fuck I am, and how like my mental model needs to be like completely updated, because like academia is just not what people thought it was. Oh, right. But where I was going with that is to say that, what I think people are actually optimizing for is just status for its own sake, I think, and security. I mean, if you think about it, like the main things that academia can give you, if you can work hard and win the lottery and get a tenure track position, you're respected by other people. You have the stamp of respectability. You have a profession that people like look up to and admire. So you get that status bump. and it's secure. Like it is, you know, if you get tenured, it is still very secure. So like what academia really is it's an intellectualized status competition that is almost fully occupied now by people who are primarily who are smart, yes, and variably, you know, intellectually able, and often very intellectually able, and sometimes with very legitimate, interesting, valuable projects, no doubt. But on the whole, as an institution, on average, it's mostly an intellectualized, like performance that is really about people who mostly crave status and security. Like that's the name of the game. And I think the reason I'm kind of seeing this more clearly than maybe other people, or maybe the reason I'm like thinking about it and talking about it more than other academics, is because I've never really had much of a taste for status. I never really wanted, like, that wasn't what I was in the game. I never want, like, that's not what I came here for at all. I'm not saying I'm like, oh, I'm so noble. No, not at all. I mean, I have all my imperfections as anyone, like, and I enjoy status like everyone does, but it's not like what I got into this game for. And also security, like I have a high tolerance for like risk, and I have a low demand for security, to be honest. So like the two things that seem to be like what most people around me are actually looking for, and the reason they're here, is actually like they're two things that just that had nothing to do with why I wanted to be here. And so now I'm just like trying to make sense out of like where I am.
Well, it sounds like a healthy attitude to take if you want to keep your own thoughts and keep your own ideas, and not end up walking into somebody else's mold for an academic.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But it is also, it's a bit of a problem for me now, because I'm like, I basically need to, I have no idea what to do, to be honest. Like I think I mean, like I said, I'm doing well in like my career, but I'm not gonna, like, this is not for me. It's not for me. It's like, I'm not gonna, I don't want to be here. That I cannot imagine my whole life in this career. But this is like all I've ever set out to do. Like ever since I was like came of age, like I only ever had one goal, which was like to be an academic, and I was lucky enough to get that. And now that I'm here, I'm like, this is not like, I don't know. I don't even know. Yeah. That's why I'm like so obsessed with this. And that's why I'm like ranting at you. Sorry. I'm like kind of lecturing like a little crazy right now.
Hopefully something will come of these decentralized spaces and the other places where you can work. And, you know, it's hard to monetize, which is why it's difficult to do full time. But we never know what the future holds. If these kind of mediums increasingly replace old media and traditional forms of education, it could provide a reasonable alternative to that kind of career.
Right. Well, I just went on a long rant, so I do apologize for that. I'd like to kind of give you an opportunity now to you know, go on any rants you want to. In fact, is this something that, as someone who writes, I mean, you write a lot on the internet. I'm pretty impressed by especially for someone who says that you say that you didn't do well in university. So you know, you have quite an impressive, you know, kind of list of online writings and publications online. So like, where do you see all of this going? Like in terms of, you know, like the future of intellectual influence, and clearly you believe in trying to figure things out and putting time and effort and energy into getting your thoughts into words and building. You're clearly like building, you know, a corpus, if you will. So like, do you think that we're going into a place where, you know, people like you, there'll be more and more people like you, and that'll be more and more successful and influential, and maybe there will be, you know, like traditional institutions of higher education will kind of implode from just the increasing prevalence of non-academic intellectuals just doing interesting stuff that starts to kind of drown out the academic nonsense? Like, do you see that kind of, that'd be like a more positive trajectory? Positive in the sense of like what you and I think are both kind of into, or
I don't know about implode, but I do think it will significantly decentralize, and other institutions will replace it. Well, not replace it, but gain some of its influence and some of its clout.
Well, because some people think that, you know, like political correctness and SJWism and its whole kind of like academic complex is like gonna be increasingly strong and pervasive, and it will increasingly start to lock down more and more. Do you not think that?
I'm not sure really. I can't see any kind of coherent outcome for the future, in that I think there will be great divisions on all levels of society. So you will have that hyper leftist corner, and then you will have more, I hope not just anti-SJW, because it's quite a boring thing to become, but more conservative, more libertarian spheres mixing together.
Right, right. Well, hey man, I'm conscious that we've now been going for a little bit more than an hour and a half, and so I don't want to overtax you. We're probably both maybe starting to run out of steam a little bit. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I've got to admit, I am a bit. I'm an hour ahead of you, so I'm
yeah,
fading a little bit.
Totally, yeah, no worries. I'm starting to kind of fade too. Also, because I started even a half hour before you joined me. So, this is when like the quality of my like sentences starts to take a nosedive. So I think I should get out in front of that and bring things to a close now. But dude, this was really cool. We covered a lot. We covered a lot of ground. We talked about a whole lot of things. I hope did you find this interesting?
Yeah, I did. It was great talking to you. And I hope your viewers enjoyed it too.
Yeah. Thanks for you know, answering some questions and being a good sport about it. It was very edifying, and yeah, I appreciate your interest in doing this kind of random intellectual type of exchange experiment. So yeah, thanks again.
It was good fun. Thanks for having me, man.
All right, Ben, I'll be in touch with you later, dude.
Later.
All right, people, I'm fried. I'm done. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for hanging out with me for so long. And yeah, I still need some good signing off phrase, like someone said in the last chat. I need some cool thing that I say at the end, like, I don't know, something exciting that's fun and ritualistic. It's not a cult, but, you know, rituals are cool. All right, people, I'm out of here. Talk to you later. Oh, by the way, get at me if you want to learn more about the little community I'm putting together. Shoot me a message, DM me, email me, whatever. Thanks again, folks. I'll see you tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, around the same time as this, but 1 hour later. I'll tweet out some more stuff about that or whatever. All right, see you, folks.